My name is Ruby Woodworth. I'm a recruitment analyst with HR, and I am very proud to be opening for our next presenter, Lane's own Mr. Mark Harris. Mark is a Maroon griot of Yoruba Chata extraction. He coordinates the Recovery Center, a project at the Multicultural Substance Abuse Prevention Program here at Lane. He teaches the Addictive Behavior Series for Counseling and the African American Experience for Ethnic Studies. As a national, state, and local level consultant, he has written successful grants, co-authored curricula, and worked in successful and innovative prevention programs in California, Oregon, and Washington. Mark has provided technical assistance to numerous community coalitions on substance abuse prevention and treatment, gang and violence prevention, and other multicultural issues. An award-winning journalist who writes commentary for local newspapers and radio, as well as hosts a weekly television program, Diversity TV. Clearly he makes me very nervous because I'm shaking. Mark will be presenting Wiley, Griffon's Children, No Hiding Place in Oregon, excerpted from I2M Eugene, a multicultural history project. Please welcome Mark Harris.
Thank you, Ruby. Is this hot, actually? Yeah, okay. Well, I'm glad to be here. First gig in the Longhouse after more than 20 years of trying to get a Longhouse. So one could say part of the stock stories in the mainstream, what Paulette was talking about is a stock story in our culture. And so when it's a stock story in your culture, you develop science about how to deal with it. And what happened technically in our science is called microaggression. And there's a science to how you deal with it, because mainstream law currently doesn't recognize that microaggressions occur, and they occur more frequently. So one of the things that, in terms of looking at the story, the concealed resistance story in that framework of the African American experience at Lane Community College, it's a difficult story. There's stories of progress. There are people basically that bring in progressive ideas. The ideas stay, they leave. But other people come. And then, the struggle continues and the progress continues both. So I want to dedicate this, in this space, to the people that have gone before, that are with us still, and the people that aren't here, and the people yet to come. I was able to watch, through the miracle of technology, the stories, the process, and I don't know if I have a timekeeper, so I'll just do that. Okay. My partner, Sherry Turpin, and I do this multicultural history project called I2M Eugene, from the Langston Hughes poem. And one of the dynamics that we found is that professional historians, even if they concentrate on African Americans in the West, say that nothing happened in Eugene of note. And there Sherry goes into Knight Library, operating, microfilm, sitting in there for 3 or 4 months, and there's a story. And it explains a lot what has come here and what has occurred here. So Wiley Griffon is one of those stories. How many of you have heard of him? Okay. So, a few. All right. So, No Hiding Place refers to a African-American spiritual. You can download Marian Anderson's version of it on iTunes. I went to the rock to hide my face, and the rock cried out, "No hiding place." There's no hiding place down here. Justice Chess is a game theory construct that I developed from our experience here. And basically, it's a strategic process for achieving social justice, just like chess. And you can adapt it to different game boards. Right? So, if you adapt the game board to Lane Community College or Oregon or whatever, then you have a strategy in terms of always going for equality and what's stacked against you when you do that, because there's going to be resistance. So Wiley Griffon's children. So he had no children, actually. So I'm speaking metaphorically, and no children or family when he died in Eugene. So we, the 37 historical African-American employees of Lane Community College, are like Wiley Griffon's children in the old spiritual. All right? So to break that down when we get to that part, I went to the rock to hide my face, and the rock cried out, "No hiding place." So often the difficulty in dealing with microaggressions is that the institution does not know how to give you support, because it doesn't even recognize the problem is happening. Because even when you go beyond the fighting words, you know, the N words, the whatever your particular designator is, and that's illegal, people move to other forms of discrimination that seem every day and ambiguous, but actually are more dangerous because they raise your blood pressure, give you cancer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's part of the science. So I'm often asked, why do you stay here? And there are many answers. But I'll go with what Greg was talking about the other day in a meeting, Martin's words to the effect, you don't have to like or love me, but you will obey the law. But that means you have to fight to get the law. And I like to think of, if you're not going to obey the law, then you at least can obey the science that's replicated. Because the science is often ahead of the law, till the law catches up, you know, when it's hostile. So you try and connect to something greater than yourself. You remember those who've gone before. You raise those who came through you. You create beauty. You create stories to inspire. And hopefully you remember to do good self-care when you work hard. I'm working on that one. So remember to breathe. Give thanks and relax. So, civil rights struggle in Oregon. Now, many people don't realize, you know, I was pleased to see in Dr. Bell's presentation when she used a couple of books that I used in my class. Henry Lowen came through here and he was talking about sundown towns. Well, Eugene was a sundown town. So was Springfield. Huh? Reedsport. Lots of places were. Okay? And so that's part of the DNA of this place. Okay? You're an American citizen, but the state is created to prevent you from coming here as an American citizen of a state from another state. And even if you work in town, you can't be on the street after dark in the town, nor can you live in the city limits. So that's part of the history there. Right? That is often a challenge with tech. Okay, so Oregon's like a southern state in the Northwest. The only state admitted to the Union with laws that excluded free American citizens of other states, okay, while they were in the state, helping to form it. So Eugene in Lane County is kind of like a cultural center which replicates that history, both by making certain people invisible and also creating visible resistance and invisible resistance too. So for example, Thurston, which the area of Springfield and the high school and the other folks, the people he's named for. So I'm one of the people that Samuel Thurston warned you against. So it's often bad technique, but I don't to read from slides, but I never memorize his speech, but I found it often amusing. So he wrote an address to the Oregon legislature urging the prohibition of free African Americans from the Oregon Territory, in which he said, now, this is deep. Why are you banning black people? What's the raison d'etre? It is a question of life or death to us in Oregon. The Negroes associate with the Indians and intermarry. Race mixing. And then, if their free ingress is encouraged or allowed, there would be a relationship spring up between them and the different tribes, and a mixed race would ensure inimical to the whites. And the Indians, being led on by the Negro, who is better acquainted with the customs, language, and manner of the whites than the Indian, these savages would become much more formidable than they otherwise would be, and long bloody wars would be the fruits of the commingling of the races. It is the principle of self-preservation that justifies the action of the Oregon legislature. Okay. Black people mix with Indians, and because they know white culture better than the Indians, will make the Indians smarter in battle, and that will make trouble. Now, the natives were pretty good tacticians already, without our help. And the historical precedent that he's scared of here is Jamaica, Mexico, Florida. I mean, so it's not without historical precedent, but there are only 200 black people in the state at the time, and only 2 or 3 of them actually speak native languages, and those are people like Moses Harris, who's a scout, who's actually leading wagon trains of white people into the state, and when one gets stranded, goes to the native to get supplies, and then goes and helps the white people who are coming in, who are not necessarily going to be friendly to the Indians. So, and Thurston knows about Harris. No relation, but spiritual namesake. So he's advancing the idea that the principle of racial exclusion with these particular folks. So, while at the same time the laws are allowing white foreigners to come and have the same rights as white Oregon natives, right? White Oregonians. So, of course, there are already free black people here. So when we look at racial exclusion laws that are selectively applied, groups like the Knights of the Golden Circle, the Ku Klux Klan. So when I talk about civil rights struggle, that here in Oregon, it's always been kind of a pet peeve of mine of the annual celebration. We don't talk about that there was civil rights struggle here in Eugene. It's always a Southern conversation. Well, this is a Southern state. And so there was civil rights struggle from the people that were here. So when you have a Klan in operation into the 21st century, which is dangerous to talk about and reveal, and I've taken hits for that, but there it is. Historically centered in the University of Oregon, county and city government, commerce, legal, politics, law enforcement, and education. There it is. So de facto and de jure segregation, discrimination in housing, jobs, healthcare, and historical visibility in the curriculum. Like who's visible. So one of the pieces with Sherry and my project is making invisible people of color symbolically visible through various means. So if you're visible in the past, you can be viable in the present and the future. If you can see yourself in the curriculum and develop skills from the curriculum, you can change the future. So if African Americans were present before the founding of the state, who gets remembered, made visible, and who is forgotten in mainstream Oregon history? It's not just a question of who's writing the history. So these are the visible ones. Marcus Lopez, who was Captain Gray's cabin boy, first African American to set foot on Oregon soil according to the historical record. York, William Clark's slave, or manservant, as Wikipedia calls him. Moses Black Harris, trapper and wagon train scout. Jacob Vanderpool, who was a Salem, Oregon businessman, deported in 1851 under the exclusion laws. And Wiley Griffon. So there were African Americans living in Eugene from its founding. So it was illegal for them to be here. But there were enough African Americans for the newspaper that is the Morning Register, which is the Republican anti-slavery paper, right, because the party of Lincoln, asked their opinion about the end of slavery, in other words, the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. The paper chose not to print their names. So the earliest African American to be publicly acknowledged by name was Wiley Griffon. So, for example, and these references are interesting when you look them up. In February 1891, the city granted a franchise to Henry Holden to construct and operate a street railway system. On June 26, the line opened for business with mule-drawn trolleys traveling down Willamette Street from the train depot to 11th Avenue and east to the university. Oops. One of Eugene's African-American residents was one of several mule car drivers. Wiley Griffon, the ebon-hued muleteer, an obsequious Chesterfield of the system, vainly seeking to coax a spasmodic burst of speed out of the perverse long-eared critter, was a common sight along the early streetcar route. This line was closed in 1903, and the cars and rails were purchased for use of the Black Butte mines, and this, of course, was the precursor to Lane Transit District. Now, when you deconstruct, there's a quote by Ruth Shays who says, she said, "If you don't know when you've been spit upon, it doesn't really matter what else you think you know." So Chesterfield, obsequious I got, but Chesterfield, curious. So obsequious, excessively eager to please or obey all instructions. Chesterfield in my Microsoft Word dictionary on my Mac, it's a sofa or a coat. Wait, he wasn't wearing a Chesterfield, and he's not a sofa unless you're objectifying him. So is there another racial reference? There is. Chesterfield cigarettes, which were branded as the largest smoked by Black people between World War I and World War II. There's even a reference, if you look this up on Wikipedia, about "I don't want to smoke that N cigarette." And Chesterfield got dropped below Lucky Strikes. And considering this was written in the 40s or 50s, all right, obsequious Chesterfield. So this is one of two pictures of Wiley. Sherry got by talking to bus drivers who have a hidden history that university historians don't necessarily go to check out. Who was the first Black bus driver? Who was the first woman bus driver? You know, people wouldn't get on buses driven by a woman in Eugene early, and let alone a Black person. The back of the bus question, et cetera, et cetera. So part of the historical record, he made his home overlooking the mill race at what is now E-Web's employee parking lot. In his obituary, he was described as, quote, "one of the most industrious colored men in Eugene." Don't know if there were non-industrious ones, but he was remembered as having a ready smile, a kind word, being a devout and devoted Christian, a man who never drank nor used profanity. And then another obituary. He was remembered as what a Southerner would call a good, you can see that. I will not sell you the longhouse. This is in an obituary, so this is like printed. This is the discourse in, it's 1913. But, given that it's illegal for him to be in the state-owned property, he was tolerated because a good is, by definition, not uppity. He knows his place. He may have been working as a janitor at the university, but he was not necessarily offered an education there. So some of us are working on a memorial for him in the Masonic cemetery where he's buried, because his headstone disappeared, hadn't been replaced. So there's an ongoing effort to place that historical marker led by I2M Eugene. So Lane Community College shares Eugene and Oregon's history. So think of Lane's founding fathers. We were in conversation a couple of days ago, and Greg basically pointed out, well, think of them as shop teachers. This was a technical college. And I remember, the shop teachers when I was in middle school and high school. They're, ex-military veterans, white guys, shaved haircuts, and Harris, get your card. Sorry, a little trauma from back then. What did they look like? What did they think? What and who would they be comfortable with? There were cross burnings, segregation was legal, housing discrimination was just made illegal but continued. This is the context that those folks are founding the college in. So, okay. The ancestors say never describe a problem without having a solution from history or birthing a solution from your being. So part of the solution, talk about the story. So there were African Americans wanting instruction and qualified to be instructors. So we could talk about, well, I'm not going to necessarily name who was the first black student, who was the first black instructor. That's something for the institution to pick up on. Okay? There were student activists. LCC had the first black student union in the state. Okay? That agitated for the first black studies program in the state. Before the U of O, before Portland. Okay, so student activism, I'm big on that. Okay, that's a concealed story, right? They pressed for the first ethnic studies department in the state and got it in the 70s. That's a good thing. That department became interdisciplinary studies with the addition of women's studies to it. With increasing enrollment, the board ended both programs. Interdisciplinary studies survived as the women's program, women and transitions. Ethnic studies was not added until the late 90s. So when you have a setback, you regroup. Find allies, create solutions, or simply endure. So you have the women's program, the multicultural center, efforts to build a longhouse start back then. The resistance to justice is there to make you stronger. Okay, so you either keep fighting upstream or you go find a bigger ocean or lake. So when I came to Lane, there were 3 other African American employees, Bill Powell, Versi Walker, and Donna Albro. All right? Like Ralph Allison's Invisible Man, I'm an invisible man. I'm a man of substance, flesh and bone, fiber and liquids. I might even be said to possess a mind. I'm invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me. So Wiley Griffon was largely invisible in history. African Americans in Oregon also were invisible in history unless you know the story and bring it back. So how many African American employees, past and present, can you accurately name? I am not Greg Evans. Greg Evans is not Bill Powell. So BASE is a concealed resistance story. Before BASE formed, African American employees collaborated with other African Americans or communities of color to create Lane's Rites of Passage program. Donna Albro spearheaded efforts to make hiring consistently legal, fair, and increase diversity on campus. Participated in diversity team, which advocated for ethnic studies, a diversity coordinator, now chief diversity officer. We participated in critical hires, and I'll just speak to the ones that I participated in. Okay. Mary and Donna, among others. So in Lane's 47-year history, basically only 37 African Americans have ever been hired. Each has stories of resistance and triumph. These include 1 president, 2 vice presidents, first affirmative action officer, along with 3 managers, 14 classified, 16 faculty. Currently, there are 7 African Americans classified and faculty, and 1 manager, and 9 total, 2 part-time faculty. So there are 2 managers that I want to talk about that are both ancestors now. 2 managers, deans of social science and math. Dr. Nwafejukwu Okole Uwadibie, Yoruba of Nigeria, and Dr. Derek Mpinga Shona from Zimbabwe. Both from Africa with advanced degrees, speaking 17 languages between them. Dr. Uwedibie had 8 languages, 2 econ textbooks, basically left us with the quote, "Lane is a great training ground for learning how to deal with institutional racism." Dr. Mpinga, 9 languages, dual degrees in math and nuclear physics, and adding Spanish and ASL to his 9 languages. Now, what if we made that minimum qualification? So when personal opinion becomes educational policy, either in hiring, curriculum, student success, one of 4 types of institutional racism is in play. These are quotes from the workplace. "People like you don't last long in Eugene." "You mean black people?" That's a Collier responding. "No, smart people. You're too smart for Eugene." This is taught in the classroom. Not my classroom, but that same person. "Slavery improved black people because they were savages in Africa." Now, if you can find educational justification for that, I have, but you might want to consider the effect on the student beyond academic freedom. I'm just saying. So my response was to have a class that started in 12,000 BC and goes to now. But there was resistance. So part of the takeaway with students is find yourself represented in the curriculum. Barriers to your success outside of yourself may not always be visible. Train yourself to recognize them, prepare for them, and keep striving to be excellent, because there's always the possibility that the person in front of the classroom might not always be an ally. We hope they are, but in our culture we train for resistance. That's part of the story, to expect that it will be there. Dr. Mpinga, algebra is a civil rights issue. He asked the question, why are students having to take algebra 5 times? We math instructors are the students that got it first time every time, or at least within the same class. Perhaps the problem doesn't lie alone with the students, but how we are teaching. Let's improve it, implement the algebra project, which was bad idea. Algebra is a civil rights issue. Harvard-trained mathematician, SNCC organizer, basically curricular change. So math skills associated with persistence and success. So I would leave you with the idea that the program was resisted while Derek was here, wasn't implemented long after he left. So part of the takeaway is, in the black old school, the algebraic formula for success is 2x plus y. You need to know twice as much as those barring your way so that you can get around them, and why. So I'll leave this up where it can be accessed. Thank you for your attention.
Stories. Now we have Michael Somino, who is the coordinator of ethnic studies, here to read his poem that he submitted for this conference. Dean's giving me a sign back there to do what? Oh, take more time? Oh, but they're going to have to hook Michael up here. Oh, he's going to read it here. He's going to read it here. Also, Michael's poem is in your program. So, and as we've talked about, there's many different ways of telling stories. Poetry is one way of doing that. So here we have an example that Michael's done. And we've also asked Michael to share a little bit after his story about why he wrote the story, or what's his story about the story.
A couple quick things. Dr. Powell, when he retired, he handed me all of his archival material, kind of loosely defined as race relations at Lane Community College. I've dug around in the basement archives and in the library archives, and have a lot of this history too. And I think it was in the last 2 years that at least 2 students came to my office and complained about an ongoing history instructor at this campus that continues to teach that slavery improved black people. So just in case you're feeling compelled to put this deep in history and this isn't something that happens now, is ridiculous. Came here in fall of '99, so everything that I'm going to read to you has happened since then. And the title of my poem is How About You? I have been mistaken for 7 other staff members of color on this campus. How about you? Prior to my first day of work, I was warned not to create an open flame in my office for ceremonial purposes. How about you? I have been called a reverse racist. How about you? I have been investigated for being a reverse racist. How about you? You remember that one? My qualifications were in question when I was hired. How about you? I was told that I didn't get a different job at the college because, quote, the minority quota had already been met, unquote. How about you? Because we couldn't hire more than one in my department at one time. I have been physically threatened twice and verbally once on this campus. How about you? My field of study is outlawed in Arizona. How about you? That's kind of a new thing. I was interviewed by the FBI about racism on campus. How about you? LCC board member attacked my work ethic and disparaged my professional reputation. How about you? I have a printer in my office because one or more coworkers in my department used to throw my work in the garbage. How about you? I have had one or more unauthorized persons in my office going through my drawers. How about you? I had a swastika drawn on my bulletin board outside of my office. How about you? I think there's a child here, so I won't tell you what was written with the swastika. I have some very close friends and allies on this campus. How about you? And I see many of them in this room right now. My family is proud of me. And my work here. How about you? In spite of everything that has happened to me, I love working at Lane. How about you? A few years ago during an accreditation process, I was helping on 2 pieces of the accreditation. And there was a lot of wording within the accreditation that talked about the faculty. I kept saying the faculty. And although I am part of the faculty, I strongly believe that there are more than one type of faculty on this campus, because the faculty at different times have reminded me that I'm not part of the faculty. And in conversations that I've had with friends and allies on this campus, where I would actually, I know that what I'm writing, many people in this room have experienced. Maybe some of it's the same, maybe it's different. I don't think that I'm unique in this sense. But this is really just kind of I think every time, and honestly, I don't look like other faculty of color on this campus. Everybody I've been mistaken for, I am better looking than they are. But in kind of the nowadays, when people call me either Jim or James or any other number of people, you know, I just go along with it and say hi. How's it going? You know, because it's not worth reminding people at this point. So anyway, thanks, and I guess onward and upward.